Have you ever truly listened to the silence? Not the empty silence of a tomb, but the dense, pregnant silence of a womb, holding within it all the potential. Every heartbeat of a life about to begin. Such was the silence that blanketed the world after the Great Flood. It was a pristine quiet, cleansed by the fury and mercy of God, where the very air tasted of damp earth and a dawn that had never been seen before. From the deck of the great ark, resting like a man-made mountain upon the peaks of Ararat, a single family emerged. They were not merely survivors, they were the first page of a new history, and in their veins flowed not only the memory of a world drowned in oblivion, but also the seeds of every empire, every language, every war, and every prayer to come. There was Noah, the patriarch whose eyes held the deep lines of both obedience and burden, the shepherd of humanity's survival. And beside him, the future, personified in his 3 sons. They were not just 3 men, they were 3 primordial pillars upon which the entire complex edifice of human society would be built. Each carried a destiny, a disposition, carved into the very marrow of his being. The firstborn, Shem, carried within him a listening heart. His was the lineage that would keep the memories, that would write down the sacred promises. His descendants would be the priests, the ones who sought the meaning behind the stars. Instead of merely measuring the distance between them, they would learn to distinguish the whisper of God from the roar of the world. From Shem's line, the prophets would rise, the anointed kings would be crowned, and an eternal covenant would be etched. He was the very embodiment of the soul of the worshipper. Next was Japheth, whose name meant expansion. His spirit was a restless wind. His descendants would not be content with familiar horizons. They would set the sails of discovery, crossing oceans that others believed were the edges of the world. They would climb the highest mountains not to build altars, but simply to see what was on the other side. They would ask probing philosophical questions under strange constellations, seeking order in the chaos of thought. He was the spirit of the explorer. And then there was Ham. His name, in the ancient Hebrew tongue, meant hot, passionate, a fire that always burned. But perhaps another title describes his essence even better: the architect. Ham carried within him the heart of the builder. To him, this reborn world was not a mysterious garden to be contemplated, nor was it an endless map to be explored. It was a block of raw, untamed marble, a rich mine of ore, yet to be smelted, a land waiting to be shaped by the will and hand of man. The blood in his veins pulsed with the urge to transform, to master the chaos of nature, to turn wet clay into solid brick, to raise permanent cities from temporary shelters. His eyes did not look to the heavens for revelation, but down to the earth to calculate a foundation. But what tragedy unfolds when a gifted builder forgets the divine architect who created him? What happens when the skillful hands move before the heart has learned to bow in humility? The story of Ham, a story shrouded in millennia of misinterpretation, is not truly about a curse born of anger. It is about a choice, a fateful choice, made in the dim light of a tent that would echo through the corridors of the pyramids, across the shelves of ancient libraries, and upon the battlefields of history. Are you prepared to see what was truly built, and what was tragically broken on that fateful day? Power and frailty are often separated by a single moment, a single breath, a single cup of wine. Noah, the hero who walked with God through a corrupt generation, who endured the scorn of a world while building a colossal ark on dry land, now succumbed to the sweet fruit of his own vineyard. He lay in the privacy of his tent, lost in a drunken sleep, stripped of his usual authority, utterly and vulnerably human. His intoxication was more than a personal failing. In this nascent world, where every act was symbolic, it was a profound test. The sacred order, the figure of the father, the spiritual leader, was momentarily absent. And in that vacuum of power and honor, his 3 sons faced an unspoken test, a crossroads of the soul. Then Ham entered. But what did his eyes see? A venerable father in a moment of weakness, deserving of a son's quiet protection? Or did he see a fallen symbol of power, a system of leadership that had just revealed its flaws? The heart of the builder within him, ever attuned to cracks and inefficiencies, saw a problem to be solved. He did not see a father, he saw chaos. Instead of acting from reverence, he acted from cold analysis. He stood there in the shadows, observing, assessing. Was this the moment he concluded that this new world could not rely on such a fragile, old order, that it needed a new kind of strength, a more practical, resilient, and sober leadership? His next action revealed everything. He did not reach for a blanket. The builder's hands did not move to cover the floor. Instead, his feet carried him outside, not in a flurry of shame or confusion, but perhaps with a sense of grim validation. He sought out Shem and Japheth, and his words were not a hushed call for help. They were a report, a cool declaration of an observed fact. The old order is weak. Come and see. It was the act of a man who wanted to seize the blueprint of the future for himself, an attempt of the hands to supplant the soul, of pragmatic reason to replace reverent faith. The response of Shem and Japheth, in contrast, came from an entirely different realm of being. They did not come to see. They did not come to analyze. Their hearts felt the sanctity of the familial bond, the fragility of honor. They took a garment, laid it upon both their shoulders, and together they walked backward into the tent. It was a dance of profound humility. They covered the weakness without having to witness it. They preserved the honor without having to judge the fall. They chose to mend the foundation rather than declare it broken and build anew upon its ruin. That night, in the quiet of a simple tent at the foot of Mount Ararat, two worldviews collided in silence, yet with the force of an earthquake. And the coming dawn would bring not just light, but a verdict that would shape the destiny of continents for millennia to come. When Noah awoke, the air in the tent felt thick, heavy with more than the lingering fumes of wine. The intoxication had passed, but another, far more bitter taste remained, the taste of truth. When he learned what had transpired, his reaction was not the explosive rage of a dishonored father. His eyes, as he looked upon Ham, did not burn with anger, but with the cold, sorrowful light of prophetic clarity. He saw not just his son's action, but a chain of consequences stretching like a long, dark shadow across generations. He saw the seed of pride that had been planted in the night, and he knew exactly what kind of tree it would grow into, and what kind of poisonous fruit it would bear. The words he then spoke, words that have been tragically misunderstood and abused for millennia, were not truly aimed at Ham, the perpetrator of the offense. They passed through Ham, aimed directly at his future, a future crystallized and personified in his son. Canaan, cursed be Canaan, Noah said, his voice low and heavy with destiny. A servant of servants, he shall be to his brothers. Why Canaan? Why not Ham? Was the young Canaan also present, joining in his father's mockery? The scripture is silent on this detail, but a deeper spiritual truth is being unveiled. In the ancient mindset, a son was not merely a separate individual, he was the continuation, the living embodiment of his father's essence and trajectory. Noah looked at Ham, at the heart of the builder, beating with proud independence, and he saw its inevitable path. He saw a lineage blessed with extraordinary talent to build, to create, to rule, but cursed with a fundamental lack of wisdom to know why they must build. This curse, therefore, was not an arbitrary punishment from an angry God or father. It was a prophecy, a declaration of a cold, unbreakable spiritual law. Genius without reverence will always lead to emptiness. Ambition untethered by humility will ultimately lead to self-destruction. Noah foresaw that Canaan's descendants would be master builders. They would erect magnificent cities, glorious temples, and impenetrable fortresses, but they would build them all to glorify themselves, to serve their own appetites. They would turn the gifts of the Creator into sophisticated tools of rebellion against him. They would possess the masterful hands of an artisan, but they would carry the wandering heart of an orphan, always trying to build a home, but never feeling like they truly belonged. The prophecy that he would be a servant of servants must also be understood more deeply. It speaks not necessarily of iron chains of slavery. It speaks of a more subtle bondage. Those who live only for earthly power and possessions ultimately become slaves to the very things they create. They are ruled by their greed, chained by their lusts, and in the end, they serve a larger historical purpose that they themselves are blind to. The verdict was cast, and from that moment, the complex legacy of Ham would split into two fateful branches. One, the line of Canaan, would carry the heavy burden of the cautionary prophecy. The other three branches would rise from that shadow to demonstrate to the world the incredible power and limitless potential of the heart of the builder. If the story of Canaan is the tragic warning of where the builder's heart can fail when it loses its way, then the story of his elder brother, Cush, is the first magnificent testimony to where it can gloriously succeed. After leaving the ancestral lands, the descendants of Cush did not go on to build cities that would rot from within. They traveled south, under the brilliant African sun, and they built kingdoms. They did not just erect walls, they established thrones. They did not just create marketplaces, they founded dynasties. They were the Cushites, the Nubians, the Ethiopians of the Bible. Their name, when spoken in the courts of the ancient world, was synonymous with power, wealth, and an undeniable royal dignity. They were not a forgotten tribe on the fringes of civilization. They were the rivals, the allies, and at times, astonishingly, the rulers of the mighty Egyptian empire itself. Does it surprise you to learn that for a period known as the 25th dynasty, the great pharaohs of Egypt, who considered themselves living gods, had the blood of Cush flowing in their veins? This was not a barbarian conquest. Historians call it a renaissance, a time when the Cushite kings from the south brought order, stability, and a renewed religious fervor to the weakening land of the Nile. The builder's heart in the line of Cush was expressed not just in military might, but in the art of governance, in the ability to organize and sustain a complex empire stretching for thousands of miles. Think of the legendary Queen of Sheba, likely from the Cushite kingdom or a land deeply influenced by it. She undertook a long and perilous journey, not for conquest, but for discovery. She brought not only gold, gems, and rare spices, symbols of Ham's legacy of earthly prosperity, but also profound questions, hard riddles to test the wisdom of King Solomon. She was the embodiment of a civilization that had reached the zenith of material power and was now seeking divine illumination. Her meeting with Solomon was not merely a diplomatic summit between two monarchs. It was a symbolic dialogue between two great legacies, the power and wealth of Ham, seeking the wisdom and revelation of Shem. And in the darkest hours of Israel's history, when the ruthless and unstoppable Assyrian Empire lay siege to Jerusalem, poised to obliterate the city of the covenant, who arrived as an unexpected protector, the Bible records that the Assyrian king heard a rumor that Tirhakah, king of Cush, has come out to fight against you. A king from the line of Ham, a builder of empires, became God's instrument to protect the line of Shem. Was this not a glimpse, a flash of lightning, revealing the Creator's true intent, that power and faith were not meant to be adversaries, but to serve a higher purpose together in the divine symphony of history? The legacy of Cush was measured not in blocks of stone or bars of gold, but in the thrones they established the eternal symbol of human order, authority, and governance. Nowhere in the ancient world did the heart of the builder, the legacy of Ham, beat with such potent, complex, and contradictory force as in the fertile lands nourished by the great Nile River. Mizraim, the second son of Ham, is the biblical name for Egypt, and Egypt, throughout the biblical narrative, is the great paradox, a two-faced river, a land of both refuge and bondage, of miracles and oppression. On one side of the river, it was a place of breathtaking creation, where human genius seemed to touch the divine. The descendants of Mizraim turned a strip of desert into a vibrant cradle of civilization. They looked to the night sky, not just with awe, but with the eye of a scientist, and from it, they charted one of the most accurate solar calendars, dividing time into measurable units. They looked at the human body, not just as a fragile vessel, but as a machine to be understood, pioneering medical techniques, surgery, and pharmacology that were millennia ahead of their time. And most profoundly, they looked at the finality of human life, at the specter of death, and they decided to challenge it. They built tombs of immortality, the Great Pyramids, architectural marvels of such staggering precision that they defy modern explanation. The pyramids were not just tombs, they were the builder's heart's most audacious declaration. We will not be forgotten, we will endure. But the river had another face, a darker, more treacherous current. It was a place of bondage. The very same genius for organization and systematic construction that raised the pyramids was turned into a vast machine of oppression against the people of Israel. Their efficient administration became a tool for enslavement. Their great wealth, their magnificent cities and temples, were built on the sweat and tears of slaves. Herein lies the inherent danger, the shadow that always follows the heart of the builder. When it focuses only on the what and the how of building, it forgets the most important questions of for whom and why. Egypt built for the glory of its pharaohs, for the worship of its own animal-headed gods, and in the process, it forgot the Creator who had gifted them with such talent and intellect in the first place. Yet, even in the darkness of bondage, God's mysterious plan was at work. Consider Joseph, a son of Shem, a man of divine dreams, who was brought to this very land of Ham. And here, he became its greatest administrator, uniting his spiritual wisdom with Egyptian power and systems to save the known world from famine. Once again, we see the intersection. The hands of Ham served the soul of Shem, and then Moses, another son of Shem, born into slavery, was raised in all the wisdom of the Egyptian court. God placed the future liberator of his people into the very heart of Ham's power and knowledge to equip him for an impossible task. When Moses led Israel out of Egypt, he did not just carry the covenant of God in his heart. He carried in his mind the knowledge of law, of military strategy, of administration, knowledge he had learned from the descendants of Ham. The legacy of Mizraim is an eternal reminder that the greatest human gifts can be used for both glorious creation and terrible oppression. The choice always lies in the heart of the builder. While his brother Cush built thrones of power, and his brother Mizraim raised monuments to immortality, the third son of Ham, Put, forged a different kind of legacy. He and his descendants built something less tangible but no less crucial, a shield. The legacy of Put is not recorded as often in royal chronicles or temple engravings, but it echoes on battlefields, in the clash of bronze on bronze, and in the solemn prophecies of war. Put represents the protective strength, the martial prowess, the disciplined and steely aspect of the heart of the builder. His descendants spread across the rugged and challenging landscapes of North Africa. They were the Libyans, whose warriors were legendary, the nomadic Berbers, masters of the vast Sahara, and the founders of the mighty maritime empire of Carthage. They were a people of the desert and the sea, hardened by the elements and by constant conflict. They did not spend their time building monuments to be admired. They spent their time forging sharp swords and sturdy shields, to defend their lands and to conquer their enemies. In the pages of Scripture, the descendants of Put are consistently mentioned in a military context as a force to be reckoned with. The prophet Jeremiah, describing a powerful army, wrote, "Harness the horses, mount, you horsemen, stand forth, you warriors, the men of Cush and Put who carry the shield." They were not secondary players. They were sought-after mercenaries, formidable allies that any king would want in his army. When Pharaoh Shishak, a king of Libyan descent, invaded Jerusalem, In the time of King Rehoboam, the Bible records that his army included Libyans and Cushites. Once again, we see the legacy of Ham, with its military might, playing a pivotal and direct role in the history of Israel. Whether as friend or foe, Carthage, the jewel of North Africa, was perhaps the greatest and most representative achievement of Put's legacy, a city built on the coast. It grew into a maritime empire that dared to challenge the power of Rome itself in the brutal Punic Wars. The strength of Carthage came not just from its trade routes, but from its disciplined armies and brilliant generals like Hannibal. They were defenders, builders of coastal fortresses and mighty naval fleets. They were the very embodiment of Ham's shield. The legacy of Put, however, also carries an important lesson. It reminds us that the builder's heart is not only about creative artistry, it is also about strength, discipline, and the capacity for protection. But, just like a shield, that strength can be used to defend life or to protect tyranny and injustice. The descendants of Put, with their martial power, are often found in alliances that stand against the declared will of God in the prophecies. Their strong shield was not always on the side of righteousness, and that is another lesson from the complex legacy of Ham. Strength without a righteous, divine purpose to guide it will ultimately serve only chaos and destruction. And now, our journey must circle back to the starting point of the tragedy, to Canaan, where Noah's sorrowful prophecy was fulfilled with a terrible and devastating finality. If Canaan's brothers were testaments to the extraordinary potential of the builder's heart, Canaan himself became the ultimate testament to its inevitable collapse when it lacks a soul. The descendants of Canaan were, arguably, the most artistically and technically gifted builders of all Ham's children. They were masters of urbanization, architects of wonders that astonished the ancient world. Think of Jericho, one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities on Earth, fortified with massive, seemingly impenetrable double walls, a symbol of strength and security. Think of Tyre and Sidon, the great Phoenician port cities, descendants of Canaan, which became the commercial hubs of the entire ancient world, centers of unimaginable wealth and luxury, whose fleets sailed the length of the Mediterranean. They invented the alphabet, a powerful tool for recording knowledge and conducting trade. The builder's heart in their lineage reached the zenith of technique, artistry, and sophistication, but they built it all on a hollow foundation, a foundation of pride and forgetfulness. They possessed everything, except the one thing that mattered most, a soul that knew how to worship. Noah's prophecy came to pass with tragic precision. Their genius, unguided by the fear of the Lord, did not simply vanish, it turned inward and began to self-destruct. Their creativity was not used to celebrate life, but to glorify depravity and death. Their magnificent cities became centers of moral rot. They built altars not to the Creator, but to grotesque gods like Moloch, which demanded they sacrifice their own firstborn children in burning fires. They practiced ritual prostitution in their temples, believing such acts would appease their fertility gods. They used their creative minds to engineer ever more sophisticated forms of sin, and herein lies the greatest tragedy of Canaan. They became slaves to the very things they built. They were shackled by their own wealth, ruled by their insatiable appetites, and enslaved to the gods their own hands had carved. When the people of Israel, the descendants of Shem, who carried the soul of the covenant, entered the land under God's command, it was not an act of imperialistic invasion. It was an act of divine surgery, painful but necessary. God used a people with a worshipping soul to cleanse a land that was dying from the emptiness of a builder's heart gone astray. Yet, even in the darkness of this judgment, a single ray of grace shone through. Rahab, a Canaanite woman living within the doomed city of Jericho, heard of the works of Israel's God, and she chose faith over the security of her city's mighty walls. By placing her trust in the God of Shem, she not only saved her family from the destruction, but she was grafted into the very lineage that would produce the Messiah. The story of Canaan is an eternal warning. echoing through the ages. Any civilization, any person, no matter how splendid or talented, will crumble if they build their life on the sands of pride instead of the rock of truth. So was the destiny of history for these two lineages, the line of Shem with its soul of the worshipper and the line of Ham with its heart of the builder, to remain in perpetual conflict. Was God's plan for one to dominate and the other to be subdued? The entire redemptive narrative of the Bible gives us a resounding and hopeful answer. No, the ultimate purpose was not conflict, but convergence, not domination, but a divine collaboration, a symphony orchestrated by the Creator himself. Look again at the figure of Joseph, a son of Shem, a man of God-given dreams, of deep connection to the spiritual realm. But where were these dreams brought to fruition? Not on the pastoral hills of Canaan, but in the powerful courts and sprawling storehouses of Egypt, the heartland of Ham's legacy. Joseph became the living embodiment of this perfect synthesis. He used the administrative systems, the wealth, the political power, and the agricultural knowledge of Egypt, all fruits of the builder's heart, to execute a divine plan of salvation, not just for his own family, but for the entire known world. The skillful hand of Ham served the noble soul of Shem. Or consider more deeply the life of Moses. He was born of the priestly line of Levi, a branch of Shem. But who was he shaped by? By Pharaoh's own daughter. To be instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, he had the knowledge of an Egyptian prince, a military strategist, an administrator, a builder. Did God, in his infinite wisdom, intentionally place the future liberator of his people into the very heart of Ham's power and knowledge, to equip him for an impossible task? When Moses led millions of Israelites out of Egypt, he didn't just carry the covenant of God in his heart. He carried in his mind the knowledge of how to organize a nation, how to move an army, how to establish a legal code for a society. Knowledge he had learned from the descendants of Ham. This divine intersection reveals an incredible and comforting truth. God wastes nothing. He does not view the legacy of Ham, the talent for building, the gift of organization, the strength and creativity, as something to be discarded or despised. He views it as a powerful resource, a potent tool to be redeemed, sanctified, and used for the purposes of his kingdom. The story of Solomon, who married Pharaoh's daughter, is another example, albeit a more cautionary one. The union brought Israel wealth, architectural knowledge, and political stability, but it also opened the door to spiritual compromise. This shows that the synthesis is not always easy. It requires vigilance and a heart steadfastly oriented toward God. But the core message remains: when the heart of the builder is guided by the soul of the worshipper, miraculous things happen. Nations are saved, peoples are led, and God's great plan moves powerfully forward. Centuries after Joseph and Moses, this story of convergence reached its most glorious and meaningful climax in the life, death, and resurrection of the Messiah. He who was the ultimate fulfillment of the line of Shem, the very Word of God made flesh. And astonishingly, at the most crucial and sacred moments of the gospel story, we see the children of Ham appear again, no longer as rivals or enemies, but as profound participants in the very drama of redemption. Picture a dusty road leading south from Jerusalem. In a luxurious chariot sits a high-ranking official. The scriptures tell us he is an Ethiopian, a eunuch serving under Queen Candace. He is a son of Cush. He possesses power, status, and knowledge, representing the achievements and aspirations of Ham's world. He had come to Jerusalem to worship, and now, on his return journey, he is reading from the scroll of the prophet Isaiah, a treasure from the legacy of Shem. His heart yearns for something more than power and wealth. He is searching for meaning. And when Philip, a follower of the Messiah, is led by the Spirit to explain the prophecy to him, an explosion of understanding occurs. The heart of the builder has found its ultimate architect. He asks to be baptized immediately. In that moment, at a pool of water by the roadside. The good news was officially received by a son of Ham and carried back to the continent of Africa. Was this the moment the legacy of Ham began its full and glorious redemption, and then moved to another road, the sorrowful path to Golgotha, as the Messiah, exhausted from scourging, falls under the weight of the wooden cross? Whom do the Roman soldiers compel from the crowd to carry it for him? Not one of his disciples, who were hiding in fear, not a priest, who was watching from a distance, but Simon, a man from Cyrene, a city in Libya, North Africa, a son of Put, a stranger, a visitor, a man who likely had the strong shoulders of a laborer, a builder. In that fateful moment, the mighty shoulders of Ham's lineage shared the redemptive burden of the son of Shem. The hands and strength of the builder, once again, touched the sacred in the most direct and profound way. The story does not end there. Alexandria, the great city built in the land of Mizraim, quickly became one of the most important intellectual and theological centers of early Christianity. Great thinkers and church fathers like Clement and Origen arose from the land of Ham, using their intellect and talents to defend and shape the Christian faith. The promise of convergence was being fulfilled. The lineage of the builder was no longer just building earthly cities. Now, with a redeemed heart, they were helping to build the kingdom of God, a structure that would last for eternity. The story of Ham, Shem, and Japheth, of the builder's heart and the worshipper's soul, is not an ancient tale layered in the dust of the past. It is not a dry history lesson. It is our story, a grand drama playing out right here, right now, in the heart of every human being. All of humanity, with its complex history, is like a great, unfinished cathedral, a sacred architectural project, still under construction, and every one of us, when we are born into this world, is given a disposition, a spiritual inheritance in our hearts. Perhaps deep within you, you have the soul of Shem. You feel a natural longing for the spiritual, for a connection to the Creator, for meaning and purpose that transcends the everyday. You are a thinker, a prayer, a seeker of truth. Perhaps you carry the spirit of Japheth, an unquenchable curiosity, a fire that drives you to explore new lands, learn new things, and ask the questions others are afraid to ask. You are a scientist, an explorer, a philosopher, or perhaps, like billions of others on this planet, you have the heart of Ham, the heart of the builder. You may not realize it, but it beats in your chest every day. You are an artist, an engineer, an entrepreneur, a teacher. You are a father or a mother, building a family. You are a programmer, building a virtual world, a farmer, building a harvest, a doctor, building a patient back to health. You have an innate desire to create order from chaos, to organize, to improve, to transform ideas into reality, to leave a tangible mark, a lasting legacy on this world. The most important question this story asks us is not, which legacy do you carry? The real question is this: for whom do you build? The legacy of Ham, through the tragedy of Canaan and the splendor of his brothers, teaches us an invaluable lesson. The greatest talent, the mightiest strength, the most brilliant creativity, if not consecrated to a purpose higher than itself, can lead to the greatest emptiness and destruction. But when the heart of the builder finds its divine architect, when our skillful hands are guided by a worshipping soul, there is no limit to the good we can create. We can build strong families, loving communities, ethical businesses, and contribute to a better, more just world. History is not over. The cathedral is still being built, and the Creator, the architect of all ages, is inviting you, with all your unique talents and passions, to pick up your tools and join in his greatest construction of all. The music swells to a majestic, hopeful crescendo, then gently fades. If this story has touched your heart, if you have recognized the builder within yourself, please share your thoughts in the comments below. What are you building in your life? Be sure to subscribe and share this video with others who need to be reminded that their work, no matter how great or small, has a sacred place in the eternal plan. Thank you for joining this journey. And remember, keep building. Of course, here are 2 new chapters, written in English, that logically follow and expand upon the established narrative, maintaining the same tone and depth. In our modern age, an era of skyscrapers that pierce the clouds, of invisible information networks that blanket the globe, and of machines that possess the capacity to learn and reason, we must pause and ask, what is humanity, with all this power at its fingertips, truly building? The grand project of history, initiated by Noah's 3 sons, has now reached a scale and complexity once unimaginable. But is it a brilliant symphony of creation, or is it merely an ever-loudening cacophony of chaos? The answer, perhaps, lies in the interplay of those 3 great legacies in our contemporary world. The heart of Ham, the heart of the builder, has never beaten so powerfully and resoundingly. It is present in every mass production factory, every line of computer code, every audacious feat of engineering. His spiritual descendants have built a global economy, linking markets and creating unprecedented material prosperity. They have conquered diseases with advanced medicine, transformed landscapes with megacities, and are now reaching for the stars with spacecraft. The power to build, to govern, and to organize, inherent in Ham's legacy, has reached its zenith. But if we listen closely, amidst the hum of progress, can we not hear a growing emptiness? Why, in a world built for connection, do people feel more isolated than ever? Why, amidst material wealth, is spiritual despair so rampant? This is the tragedy of Canaan, repeating on a global scale. The builder's heart is operating in a frenzy, but it lacks the guidance of the worshipper's soul. We build systems of artificial intelligence without a firm ethical foundation. We exploit the planet's resources to the point of exhaustion to build our comfort, forgetting reverence for the Creator. We build a culture of consumption that fills our lives with things but leaves our souls starving. That is the noise of cacophony. And the spirit of Japheth, the spirit of the explorer, has also exploded. His spiritual children have decoded the human genome, discovered distant galaxies, and created the internet, an endless ocean of information. They have given us science and technology, the tools to understand and shape our world. But when the spirit of the explorer operates without the moral compass of the worshipper's soul, it too creates chaos. The understanding of the atom led to both nuclear power and the atomic bomb. The ability to connect globally has become a tool for both the spread of knowledge and the dissemination of hatred and disinformation. We know how to do so much, but we struggle with the question of whether we should. So, where is the symphony? It rings out in those moments when the 3 legacies find their divine harmony. It sounds when a doctor, a scientist of Japheth, uses the most advanced medical technology, a tool of Ham, with a heart full of compassion and respect for life, the soul of Shem, to save a patient. It sounds when an entrepreneur, a builder of Ham, creates a company not just for profit, but to serve the community and protect the environment, acting on ethical principles, the soul of Shem. It sounds when an artist, a creator of Ham, uses modern media, a tool of Japheth, to tell stories that uplift the spirit, sow hope, and remind us of beauty and truth, the soul of Shem. The symphony is not silence. It is the harmonious blending of different sounds. Our modern world does not need Ham's legacy to stop building, nor Japheth's to stop exploring. It desperately needs the soul of Shem, the soul of worship, of humility, of ethics and meaning to rise and become the conductor. Only then can the noise of chaos be transformed into the grand symphony of a humanity rediscovering its purpose. This struggle is not waged on a battlefield, but in the heart of every decision we make, every project we build, and every path we choose to explore. Every great story must have an ending, not a termination, but a consummation, a moment when all the threads of the narrative are woven together, revealing a meaningful and complete tapestry. So, what is the end of the story of the builder's heart? After millennia of building, conquering, creating, and also destroying, what is the final project? The scriptures do not leave us to guess. They pull back a curtain, giving us a breathtaking glimpse of the final blueprint, one not drawn by human hands, but issued from the divine architect himself. The final project is not another tower built by human hands reaching for the heavens, like the Tower of Babel of old, that ultimate symbol of Ham's legacy gone astray. The tragedy of Babel was man's attempt to build his own paradise on earth. The final blueprint, however, reveals a stunning and humbling reversal. The final construction is not something built up from the earth. It is something that comes down from heaven. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, wrote the prophet John. This is the culmination and the ultimate redemption of the builder's heart, the moment it ceases trying to build its own salvation, and instead, in awe and worship, receives a perfect creation from the hands of the Creator. In this divine city, we see the final harmony of the three legacies. The Bible says that the kings of the earth will bring their splendor into it. What can this mean? Is it not a prophetic image of the greatest achievements of humanity, now cleansed of all pride and selfishness, being offered up as a tribute to the Creator, the glory of Cush's empires, the wisdom of Egypt's libraries, the mighty shields of put all that was good, true, and noble in Ham's legacy of building will find its place in the eternal city. The scientific discoveries of Japheth, the profound philosophies, the maps of the stars, none of it will be discarded, but will be seen in the light of perfect truth. And of course, the steadfast faith of Shem, the covenants, the psalms of praise, will be the very soundtrack of its endless worship. Everything built, everything discovered, and everything believed throughout history, once redeemed, will contribute to the splendor of this final project. And at the center of that city, there is a tree of life, whose leaves are for the healing of the nations. The healing of the nations. The division that began with disrespect in Noah's tent, exploded at Babel, and fueled countless wars, conflicts, and hatreds throughout history, will finally be healed. There will be no more distinction between Shem, Ham, or Japheth. No more rivalry between the worshipper, the builder, and the explorer. There will be only one humanity, united in their diversity, living in the full presence of their Creator. What does this story leave us with today? It leaves us with an immense hope and a profound purpose. Our work of building in this world, whether we are building a family, a business, a work of art, or a bridge, is not meaningless. It is a training ground, a workshop. It is not meant to construct a paradise on earth, but to form us into citizens worthy of the paradise to come. The final masterpiece is not what our hands build, but who we become in the process of building a people who know that all talent, all strength, all ambition to build finds its true meaning only when it is placed in the hands of the divine architect. The great construction site of history is still active, but the final blueprint has been revealed, and each of us is invited to become a master craftsman, building our lives, not for our own glory, but for the glory of a project that will last for eternity.